This video is my obviously belated preview of the Ravens-Browns matchup in Week 5. Baltimore's trying to even their record at 5-5, climb out of a really terrible start, obviously. They're certainly favored to do so on the road. A touchdown or slightly more favorite, depending on where you look. This is a very poor Cleveland Browns offense, but dangerous, athletic, fast, highly aggressive, and committed defense. I do, from a Ravens standpoint, my main concern for this game, besides turnovers, is that there has seemed to be a pattern in recent years where if Marlon Humphrey misses a game for our defense, and we've been really sharp and prepared on that side of the ball, decisive, while being versatile from a formation standpoint, meaning we've been able to match personnel groups and formations from our base nickel platform. But when Marlon has been out, we've oftentimes experienced this kind of dip in efficiency or ability to match other teams' top-end wide receiver talent. I think this one sets up to be a very interesting clash, if you will, when the Browns have the football. Look, they've produced less than 300 yards of offense their last 4 games, and that's including a 31-6 win over the Dolphins. They only put up 206 yards of offense in that win. They benefited, obviously, from 4 turnovers by Miami. Another way to look at it is this. In their last 3 games, they have scored 64 points. That's including last week's 27-20 loss to the Jets. It's fair to look at it that way, right? Their offense has some real deficiencies, even though the rookie running back Quinshon Judkins, is now up to 561 rushing yards through 8 games. He's only averaging 4 yards per carry. He does have 5 touchdowns. They rely on duo concepts a lot, and I mean a lot. Look, it is effective, and they're usually running it from 12 personnel. If you don't know, the Cleveland Browns are in 12 personnel over 43% of the time. That's the highest in the NFL by 4 percentage points over the Ravens. It makes sense, right? David Njoku and the rookie tight end Harold Fanning. First of all, they're very talented. Not great blockers, either one of them at the point of attack necessarily. They bring on other guys to do that, in my opinion. Having said all of that, their 12 personnel stuff, it's not like it's extremely efficient. I think part of that is possibly pulled down by, they're using Dylan Gabriel as their starting quarterback. I'll have more on that later from a statistical standpoint. But their jumbo 12 is actually been very effective in a small sample size, both on film and when you look at EPA. I use Sumer Sports for that stuff, and oftentimes there's a week lag time, at least in my experience, trying to look at that stuff. But it's a great website if you don't take a look at it. I don't really use Sumer Brain at all, the AI/website that they've put out, but I suspect it's probably fantastic, just like their actual website. Once you get about 8 to 10 games deep in a season, I feel comfortable looking at EPA. I generally don't want to do that when we're talking about sub-6 games played, but here we are, 9 games in, and the Browns are 29th in points scored per game, 16.2. They did only throw for 120 passing yards last week against the Jets. During the last 3 games, when they've scored more points, like I said, 64. That's more points than they've scored at any stretch in the last 2+ years, except for weeks 11 to 14 of the 2024 season last year. They've only put up 367 passing yards during that time frame, the last 3 games. I'm really not sure, to be honest with you, at this point, if the whole passing yards thing isn't a feature of the Stefanski offense. What I mean is, with him in charge and Dylan Gabriel at quarterback, our defense from a nickel standpoint, that's our base at this point. With Kyle Hamilton as the nickel, don't get me wrong, there might be some times where we're in a base 3-4 structure, particularly against Jumbo 12. Again, that's been one of the more effective personnel groupings for Cleveland so far. By the way, there won't be any film in this preview, so my apologies that I didn't say that, in the initial lead-up. I wasn't trying to be misleading. In any case, you'll see a little bit of some statistical data flow through from the TOR metric that I provide, and I'm just really showing it to illustrate the difference between our offenses. It's drastic, it's large. The difference between our defenses, Cleveland's and Baltimore's, is far smaller, obviously. I do think that second downs and 8 of more will be an interesting moment or element here. there's a real conservative approach by the Browns, I think, in recent play calling, and I think it's possibly to avoid turnovers by Stefanski. His offenses have had real difficulty with turnovers. I'll give you some stats a little later. I think his recent play calling seems to be a reaction for that. I'm talking about 1st and 15 run plays in the first quarter. 2nd and 8 duo concepts in the second quarter. I've noted multiple of these in the film that I've watched. I did actually sit and watch the entire Browns and Jets game. I watched their game against the Patriots twice through, once on the All-22, once on the condensed version that you get for like 40, 45 minutes, basically the broadcast. I think their offense is trying to shorten the game, which is kind of paradoxical to their defense. The style of play that Jim Schwartz has used over the last couple of years, high pressure from their four-man front, sometimes occasional blitzes, but man-free, really trying to create, I think, as many possessions as possible to increase the opportunity for turnovers by their defense. And so it's an interesting dynamic for me, at least now, to see their defense playing coverages. Is their defense going to play coverages that are maybe complementary to this more conservative offensive path that they appear to have been using a little bit lately? I do think it's a terrible offensive scheme, to be blunt. It's kind of unbelievable that you end up with Gabriel as your developmental quarterback project, I guess. Meanwhile, you're paying Myles Garrett a ton of money. Denzel Ward, I think $14 million. Malik Collins, free agent signing, 2-year, $20 million contract. He's a heck of a player. He gave us trouble last time we faced him. They do have lots of rookies on defense. They had a deep draft class, in fact, 2025. Fanning Jr., Carson Schweschinger is actually leading the team in tackles. He has an interception. He's actually effective against the pass as well. I wanted to show some of the data that I have that's beyond just points per game. Look, Stefanski's put together another forgettable offense in 2025. Here's their points per game in reverse order by season. 16.2 this year, 15.3 in 2024. Now, they did score 23 points and 22 points per game in 2023 and 2022 under Alex Van Pelt. Everybody was complaining about him at the time. Looking back, things look superior. Systemically, they throw a lot of interceptions, and I feel like the recent play calling style from their offensive staff has been a reflection to try to avoid that. Compare this to what has occurred in Baltimore in the last 2+ years. Right, here's their interceptions by year. 2025, they've thrown 9 picks in 9 games. Last year, 19 during the regular season. Most of that was Jameis Winston. He's just never been able to avoid turnovers in the NFL at all. 2023, Flacco and Deshaun Watson and others, but mostly those two guys, they combined for 24 interceptions. That season, of course, they did have a 6 or 7 game stretch where offensively things looked great with Flacco at the helm. Even though he was throwing a lot of touchdowns, he was also throwing picks, and it was a meltdown at the end, right? They got blown out in Week 18, I think, against the Bengals, and then their playoff game against the Texans was, an abomination. My point is, to be blunt, Stefanski's offensive system stinks. Look, they also threw 19 interceptions in 2022. Altogether, in the last 60 games under Stefanski, 71 interceptions thrown by Cleveland quarterbacks. Gabriel, Flacco, Watson, Winston. The issue's not the quarterbacks. It's the guy in charge of them. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't beat us on Sunday, right? Winston and the Browns upset Baltimore last year in Week 8. A very similar game. They're 2-6 at the time, I believe. We're favored. Clearly, Lamar played in that game. I think we've got to avoid turnovers. That goes without being said. They haven't won a single game in 2024 and 2025 without being either even in terms of turnovers or in the positive. I take that back, actually. I guess Week 3 this season against the Packers, their upset win over Green Bay, each team forfeited the ball once, so they were even. Let's do it the other way, I guess. Anytime the Browns have been -1 or more turnover margin in 2024 and 25, I think they're like 3-19, 3-17, somewhere in that range. They actually figured out a way to lose a game to the Lions in Week 4 while they were +2 in turnover margin. It's just a really bad offense. We've got a chance to hold them down. If the coverage schemes are solid, like they have been lately, Baltimore's given up less than 15 points per game in the last 4 weeks. Basically, since Hamilton moved, to the dedicated nickel. Zach Orr's group's been improved dramatically. That's obvious. But also, I think we've got to make the right coverage choice for this matchup. And I think they're being risk-averse lately with their play calls to put Dillon Gabriel at the least amount of risk possible. We do the same thing on the defensive side with our pass rush plan, which is so crazy. We've only got 12 sacks this year. It started in week 1 against the Bills. I won't say it's been the same game plan every week, but basically trying to contain the quarterback as much as possible. Compared to Cleveland, they're in attack mode, right? Collins has 4 sacks. Myles Garrett has 11 by himself. We only have 12 as a team. Interestingly, Collins and I think a backup defensive end, Alex Wright, who's out, they would be leading our team in sacks. Collins has 4 and Wright has 3. So the Zach Orr experiment, the way that things have worked out for the second year in a row, our defense has improved. When we played them last year, that had not occurred yet, right? That really didn't start until week 11, I think, against the Steelers in 2024. That process was faster this year. It shouldn't take that process to occur. I still think there needs to be intense reworking of the defense, the structure, and how they teach things, because obviously that we started the last 2 seasons, being complete horseshit on the defensive side of the ball. I think along with turnovers, obviously stopping a run here is key number 1, right? After watching the film of the Browns against the Jets, it's really to go back and watch the Lions game was worthless. Flacco was the quarterback in there. Joe's always been willing to take shots down the field, especially against man, right? There are consistencies, some overlap there with how they attack now with Gabriel. Here's what I mean. He's a lot more comfortable throwing against man, in my opinion. I don't know what the stats show. I'm just talking about the film that I have watched of their games. Like I said, primarily against the Jets and the Patriots. He'll throw into the boundary to his tight ends against man. He'll throw on receivers, crossing the field if they've got someone beat. They like screens against man. He's also very quick to scramble. I think that I'm not saying he's a limited quarterback intellectually. That's certainly not what I'm trying to imply. He's a rookie. He's trying to get acclimated to the game. And the offense, I suspect Stefanski's offense may have some systemic issues. He looks a lot more comfortable against man, and that dynamic now will be super interesting for us. I think Wiggins at this point probably looks better in man. I think he's struggling in the last couple of weeks specifically. Zone, he kind of gets bored a little bit. Awuzie is comfortable across techniques. Unless I'm doing my math wrong in my research, TJ Tampa is our third outside corner for tomorrow with Marlon out. So I don't even want to try to butcher the name of the most recent corner that we've signed, and then the UDFA, Martin, I guess will be active. We're very thin there, in my opinion. We're fortunate this week to be going against Gabriel, right? He's only completing 58% of his passes, and like I said, most of those are extremely short and to the tight ends. Only against man does he throw the ball down the sidelines, outside the bottom of the numbers, or really in the middle of the field. Like I said, he's really willing, almost by default, scrambles against man at times. In my opinion, Zach Orr and the staff, they should consider multiple versions of zone, split field coverages, match principles, in order to give Gabriel some pause post-snap. Hopefully just interrupt his ability to play, to build plays consecutively, back-to-back passes. I doubt if you'll see that very often. I could be wrong. Maybe they come out throwing early. I think that's in our favor. Clearly, Gabriel has some talent, right? I would be of the opinion that Shedeur Sanders would be a much better choice, both short-term and long-term, but that's me. I could be, far off there. Gabriel did throw for 18,000 yards in college, 150-plus TDs. He was at 3 different schools, but here so far at the NFL level, there's just a number of things that he can't do. Like I said earlier, I think it's imperative that we stop the run, not just slow it down, stop it completely. Stefanski knows how limited this quarterback is. 2nd and 8, even 2nd and 10 is really 1st and 10 for those guys. It's been a dangerous situation for the Ravens throughout 2025. Think back to that Lions game at home in week 3. We gave up a ton of rushing yards on 2nd and 10, 2nd and 8. It's been our detriment, in my opinion. The Lions exposed it first, and it took Orr at least 3 or 4 weeks to really adjust. We got burned by second and long often. I'm calling second and long, second and 8, second and 9, second and 10. So keep that in mind. I'm referring to run concepts. So that moment, if they do try to throw the ball on first down, they being the Browns, I would immediately look for screen on second and 10, or even a run play that we stop and it's second and 8. Screen or jumbo 12. They really seem to be able to run and throw the ball effectively out of jumbo 12. If I recall, their EPA for both of those situations was really high. It's some really boring stuff watching this offense. I sat through the whole Jets game watching it twice. Just their offensive possessions. I didn't focus on the defense at all. We've played better defense lately for sure, but to act like we didn't go up there and drop last year's game to Jameis Winston, who I don't think very highly of as a quarterback at this point, that he is who he is. It's a 29-24 win for them. He throws for 330 and 3 touchdowns. I think it would be a mistake for Browns fans to think that Dylan Gabriel can recreate that, especially the way we're playing lately on the defensive side. But it'd also be a mistake for us to be too optimistic as Ravens fans. We should be excited to a certain extent, given the circumstances of their quarterback versus ours and the play callers. I think it's obviously in our favor. But their defense has the ability to turn things around. One play. Myles Garrett can force a fumble. You could certainly see them giving us trouble with our run game and our inability to pass pro at times. I would say this: we appear to be recommitted to the run game lately. I'd like to see us continue that trend. Basically, we've been plus 150 yards or more on the ground the last 4 weeks, if I did my research correctly. Todd Monken and his side, I should say, has put up 658 rushing yards, and that's against the Rams, Bears, Dolphins, and Vikings. And the interesting thing here for me is that Lamar has only accounted for 50 of those yards. So it's not like Lamar's been a huge factor there in that 658 rushing yards in the last 4 weeks. We've run some option. Last week against the Vikings, Lamar had that really cool stretch, I think in the third quarter, where we go option, and then we run a couple of other plays in a row to kind of get the ball down and face a 3rd and 1, and then I believe it's the tush push toss. I did a video on that this past week. If you want to check it out, I'll try to link it up in the description. Basically, I think we appear to have found a winning formula, at least against the caliber of teams that we've been facing lately, and the one that we'll face today. We've got a 3-game win streak. We're +7 in turnover margin. Now, Marlon and Malachi Starks, they've been a big part of that. They've each had interceptions the last 2 weeks. Marlon also forced a fumble against the Dolphins. If you go back and watch that Dolphins game increasingly, they have opportunities where if they don't turn the football over, miss field goals, it could have been a different game. But Marlon and Malachi, they changed the game against the Vikings last week. They had the picks in the second quarter and then the third, and what was a 10-3 deficit in the second quarter eventually became a 2-score lead halfway through the third. I do think the coverage variability is something that Zach Orr and his staff need to retain and push the pace here against Dylan Gabriel. It's causing people problems. Basically, quarterbacks can't rely on the coverage based on a certain location on the field, meaning down and distance, game situation. In my opinion, we probably want to use man a little more sparingly this week. I could be well off in that regard. Maybe the Ravens are just going to play man, but that opens up the possibility for Gabriel to scramble, and he's been effective at that. This is a huge game for the defense and the team, obviously, right? 4-6 is pretty much it. If you think that we're just going to sweep the Patriots and the Packers in consecutive weeks, and then we've got 4 division games, 2 against the Steelers, 2 against the Bengals, kind of sandwiched around those 2, I just don't think you're living in reality. Not the level of O-line play that we get. Now, one caveat there. If we are committed to this new, more conservative style of play, I think that opens us up a little bit to play. And if we are going to play a better brand of defense from here on out, and we play a little bit more conservative on offense, then this offensive line, that helps them out. I don't think this is a spread offensive line. I think the numbers bear that out. Our passing yards being way, way down also kind of illustrates that point. And then Lamar he'll give us playmaking on third down, exclamation point plays when we need them. I think we've beaten 2 better teams in this stretch, this 3-game winning streak, basically referring to the Vikings and the Bears. They're better on both sides of the ball. Now those two teams have some questionable decisions from their quarterbacks at times. I think Caleb Williams has got 13 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Different universe than Dylan Gabriel, meaning the Caleb Williams to Dylan Gabriel comparison. Also, far better play callers in Chicago, Minnesota, and Miami than Stefanski. In addition, I think those guys are better teachers of the game for their young quarterbacks. Stefanski's system has generally produced turnovers, interceptions, I should say, at a high rate. They led the league in interceptions thrown in 2024. They led the league in interceptions thrown in 2023. Right now, this year, 5th with 8 interceptions. I suspect that might be why he's gone to Gabriel and is coaching him specifically to avoid turnovers, along with a conservative play-calling style. I think otherwise, that's a feature of Stefanski's offense. If we can switch coverages, if we can stop the run cold or limit it mostly, and then switch coverages post-snap, force him into making decisions as much as possible post-snap, basically separate him from Stefanski's play call, I think he'll either throw us 1 or 2 picks, or he'll resort to a ton of checkdowns or scrambles. Now, the other possibility there is that he throws a couple of touchdowns early because they get favorable coverages. Maybe we bait them into more passing plays. He threw the ball 52 times, I think, 4 weeks ago. If he throws the ball 52 times on Sunday, I think we win this game going away. I do really like the acquisition of Draymond Jones. He played last week. On the film looked quality, if you ask me. His energy and force, they're much needed. Mike Green apparently is going to play as I record this into the wee hours on Saturday morning. We could certainly cause some trouble for their offensive line, again, if we stop or slow down the run significantly. I think Stefanski likes to run screens against us at times, so we got to be aware of that. He could, I suspect he may go to screens early and some designed plays to allow Gabriel to try to have success early on, meaning so he doesn't have to process the coverage post-snap 10 or 12 times in the first half. If he ends up with 15 throws in the first half, that's probably a plus for us, number one. But even if he does, if most of those are at a time and place of Stefanski's choosing and they're designed plays, then that could help him out, right? We've been putting out really good game plans lately, in my opinion. And for them to avoid third downs, them meaning Cleveland, it's paramount. They are, in the last, I think, month, 4 games, they're 18 of 55 on third downs. It's not like Gabriel's suddenly converting third downs at a higher percentage, 32% for the last month. That number would be 31st in the NFL. By the way, they're 32nd overall for the year. So it's not like they've been converting third downs at a high rate for the whole season, nor in the last 4 weeks when Gabriel's obviously been the focus of the coaching during the week. The Ravens were at 40%, our offense. I will note this. At home, the Browns are at 40% conversion rate. Actually, it might be 42% conversion rate, so there's some improvement there. Conversely, our defense is 18th in the NFL in allowing third down conversions at a 39% clip. Basically, if we get between 32 and 37% third down rate, and we stop the run and maybe force a turnover or two, we got a great chance to win this game. By the way, our defenses, in terms of third down conversion rate allowed, were better than the Chiefs and the Steelers, which was kind of surprising to me. Basically, I think this Browns team has got to avoid those known throwing situations. Now, that's the best way forward for them, and it's the best way forward for us is to put them in as many of those as possible. 5-5 would be a great point moving forward, right? Then you see what happens. The back end of the schedule is not nearly as easy as people think. All those people talking about 12-5, man, you better worry about 5-5. With the Packers, Patriots, and 4 games against the Bengals and Steelers, this win, you absolutely need this win. I've watched the film, like I said earlier, unfortunately, but I'm not willing to go through the editing process for a preview to make the film something that'll go through YouTube. I'm just not. It just takes too much time. I should have gotten this one out for Saturday morning. That's my goal every week. Not even close at this point. Previews are very difficult to produce. I want to get better at it. In any case, the last thing I want to talk about here is an interesting dynamic from this season that's a little bit surprising, in my opinion, and that's the Ravens' passing yards. Our passing yards are way down for 2025. no matter who's at quarterback, I should say, we're fourth from the bottom of the league in total passing yards at 181 yards per game. Now, you might say, well, Lamar's missed a lot of time. Well, just hold on a second. He played weeks 1, 2, and 3, and we were at 208 yards per game. So something's different. I wonder what it could be. It's not hard to figure this out, and you knew where I was going with this. We have a tremendous weakness at offensive line, and in this particular matchup, it shows up even more. Here, I'm talking about the Browns and their defensive line, their strength point, clearly, matching up directly against our weakness. So if you've heard this rant before, that's fine, but I'm going to kind of carve it out specifically for this week's game. There's a lot of people out there that are trying to rationalize our offensive line, justify it, salary cap considerations, PFF, PFSN, PFBS, whatever. I don't care. We've given up 25 sacks in 9 games. We have one of the most athletic quarterbacks in the history of the game. He's played in 6 of them, in part of them completely, 5 to 6, whatever you want to say. We gave up 24 sacks in all of 2024. At the same time that that's occurred here this season, 25 sacks through 9 games, our run game has had stretches where it was completely shut down. Last week, we win the game. Thankfully, we're a +3 turnover margin, right? But Henry was 9 carries for 30 yards in the first half. He was, I think, 20 for 75 overall for the game. There's just no lanes to run through sometimes. And at the same time, we have consistent, unfixable weaknesses on our right side. The Vikings ran the same stunt against us 3 times. Everybody on social media, Twitter, whose fault is it? Who cares? In each case, it's a different guy's fault. Rosengarten, Falele, Justice Hill. I think Henry was on one of those snaps. The point is, we're not very good at offensive line. We're not very good with our talent level, not our coaching. And then the players' ability to adjust and recognize things on the field, it's a huge deficit as well. I just don't know if you're someone who's serious about watching football and you watch this on a weekly basis and you're not immediately alarmed, kind of disgusted by the fact that Lamar Jackson has to play behind this offensive line. I don't know that you're operating in good faith, for real. I mean, and you apply that to whoever you want. You're absolutely lost. And in the best thing that some people could do who try to talk about the Ravens is go watch film of other offensive line and go watch the things that do not happen to them and how smoothly and easily guys, rookies, not third-year developmental players, not fourth-year developmental players, easily execute combo blocks to the second level in the run game. Easily handle stunts with the guard next to them or the tackle next to them. Who cares whose fault it is? It's the people who are in charge. Harbaugh, Eric DeCosta, Warhop. It's their job to identify the players, draft them, develop them, and then teach them how to adjust in game. And we have done a good job of that. And that, to me, is the difference in games like this one. And here's what I mean. For a situation like this against the Browns, obviously we're better than them. If we also had an efficient offensive line, let's just say a top 10 offensive line, we could get Derrick Henry, Justice Hill when he's healthy, Keaton Mitchell, running lanes more consistently, and we could protect Lamar if we could do all of those things, handle the blitzes, handle the stunts, and protect Lamar. We beat, in this game, matchup today, we would win this game 9 out of 10 times. And we probably still are favored 9 out of 10 times, right? But we don't have that quality of offensive line. So that opens us up in games like this against a badass D-line. He's one of the most disruptive players in the game. You've also got a really aggressive mentality on defense, a very prepared mind like Jim Schwartz. He knows what he wants to do. We're going to have to operate uphill against their defense. We just are. Look at the second half. They dominated us in the first half of the home game. In week 2, I'm talking about. In the second half, when we were able to get the ball downfield, Lamar lit them up. Right? One of them was a scramble situation to D-Hop. I think 2 were by design, and we just had time. Here's an idea, for the offseason or any offseason. Maybe we should try to develop as high a level or elite offensive line as possible to give Lamar Jackson the best opportunity to make as many of those plays as possible. I forget who posted it up in our Ravens Discord about offensive line spending. It was a long post by someone. It appeared to be on social media. I don't know if it was Twitter or what. We are the lowest spending for our top 3 or maybe top 4 offensive linemen across all of the teams in the league with an actual quarterback who's trying to win. I'm talking about the Chiefs, the Bills, the Ravens, the Eagles, the Lions, whoever. I don't know if you want to include the Seahawks in there or not, but we were pretty low there on that group. I think the Texans were also very low. Basically, we're spending an extremely low amount of money on offensive line for our top 3 salaries. So they weren't even including your 4th highest offensive line salary, your 5th or your 6th. It was only focusing on the top end expenditure, which really I think makes the point even more valid. That makes us vulnerable. That, along with inability to coach it and get these guys ready on a weekly basis, it makes us more vulnerable when we're confronted with a defensive line like Myles Garrett and Malik Collins, even though their offense is really terrible and they're incapable of possessing the ball for long distances. The point here, if you extrapolate that out, at some point in time, we're going to have to face really good defenses like the Browns and high-level offensive talent at the same time. I think you can clearly see the problem with our O-line construction and development. After me attempting to make that point, hopefully I was able to make it in a valid enough fashion. We go into this game with a known consistent weakness, offensive line. It would make sense that Todd Monken would go to a more conservative play-calling style, one that may lengthen the amount of time that this game stays close. And if you look at what the Browns want to do, their offense might want to do the same thing. In other words, it could be a game where it's 10-7 at the half and it finishes 17-13, or maybe the Ravens are able to get a turnover or two and we're able to push it out a little further. I certainly am not saying I think we're only going to win 17-13. I really don't care about this week in terms of the score. I just hope we have one more point than they do, and we certainly don't lose or end up in a tie. I would say look for this. What's our continued approach on defense against 12 personnel? Are we going to base out of a nickel? My guess is we are. 12 personnel on 1st and 10. Njoku and Fanning, they're very talented. Fanning's got 42 catches, played well in the first meeting. Him and Judkins appear to be the biggest threats, even though Njoku's made, he scalded our defense at times, particularly on 2nd and long and 3rd and long. I do look forward to your thoughts on the game in the comments section, whether you're in agreement with me or contrast to my own, about the following things. The importance of stopping their run game and developing our own, clearly. It's a risk factor for the Browns if we're able to put the onus on Gabriel post-snap a whole bunch of times. I'm talking about 10, 12 post-snap processing decisions he's got to make in the first half and 20 to 24 overall, somewhere in that area. We can't let them create low-risk scenarios on 2nd and 4 or 3rd and 1. If this game comes down to them having to put Gabriel in situations to make 18 to 20 decisions, post-snap, where he's got to process the coverage. We know it's a pass beforehand, by the way. I like our chances here. Even though we've got an offensive line weakness against, their perceived strength, or their obvious strength, which is their defensive line. Gabriel's only thrown 2 picks so far this year. If we could get them out of their conservative approach early and often, then, maybe we could get a couple of other turnovers. They're trying to shorten the game as much as possible with their play calling style, in my opinion, lately, and I think we are too. So that almost puts turnovers and the run game at more of a premium, if you ask me. And, we know we're going to get plays from Lamar down the field with throwing the football or even with his legs. In any case, you guys let me know what you think of this preview in the comment section. I feel remiss that is a commentary-only preview, but at this point in time, to edit and show a significant number of plays requires so much time that it almost becomes not worth it on my end. I hope you guys understand. In any case, if you think other Ravens fans would enjoy this preview of the Week 11 matchup against the Browns, albeit one that is significantly late on my end, then please consider grabbing a link to this video, sharing it out on social media to help this content get more reach.